The room went dead silent the instant a heavy hand cracked across my mother's face. People stopped chewing mid-bite. Coffee mugs hovered frozen in midair, and nobody dared to make a sound. The man stood over her with a smug expression, clearly convinced that a helpless old widow had no way to retaliate. My mother slowly pushed herself off the tiled floor, touched the corner of her lip, and turned her eyes directly toward the overhead security camera. She was not looking for mercy or a savior because she knew I would eventually see that footage. What that arrogance blinded him to was the fact that I was an active military commander with decades of tactical leadership, iron discipline, and resources that spanned far beyond our small county. He thought he had bullied a defenseless woman, but in reality, he had just invited the biggest disaster of his life into his world. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, please hit that subscribe button right now to support the channel. I would also love to know where you are watching this from today, what the current weather is like in your city, and what time it is for you right now. Drop your answers in the comments below, and let us get right back into the story. My name is Hannah Vance, and I command a specialized infantry unit. People often imagine my life as nothing but orders and high stress, but the truth is that one small place kept me grounded through every deployment. That place was my mother's roadside diner, a cozy spot she had managed for over 40 years. After my father passed away 15 years ago, she refused to shut it down, declaring that serving hot meals gave her a reason to wake up every morning. Whenever I had leave, I would step behind the counter, flipping eggs while she laughed with the locals. That diner was not just a business. It was the heart of our entire community. Everything began to unravel over the past year, when an arrogant developer named Arthur Vance started acting like he owned the whole county. His wealth gave him unchecked influence, and his loud hostility was usually enough to silence anyone who stood in his way. Shop owners avoided his path, neighbors looked down, and people only spoke his name in worried whispers. My mother, however, refused to cower because she believed respect was earned through integrity rather than purchased with cash. 3 days after I returned to my base following a brief visit home, my phone rang at dawn. It was one of the waitresses, and her broken sobbing told me everything was about to change. By the time I reached the regional hospital, my mother had already been discharged, insisting she was completely fine. She even cracked a weak joke about being tough, but the deep purple bruise spreading along her cheeks spoke the painful truth. That evening, after closing the diner doors, I sat down in the office to watch the digital security logs. The timestamp showed 8 in the morning, right in the middle of the breakfast rush, when Arthur strode through the entrance. He ignored the polite staff and demanded an occupied booth immediately. When a young server mentioned a brief wait, Arthur slammed his fist onto the register counter and barked that he never waited for anyone. My mother calmly walked over, holding a warm coffee glass, and reminded him that every customer waited their turn in her building. The entire dining area grew dead quiet while Arthur leaned in close, his voice rising in anger while frightened customers stared into their plates. She remained completely composed, repeating that he would be seated as soon as a table opened up. That was when Arthur violently shoved a chair aside and slapped her across the face with full force. She crashed onto the floor, shattering a ceramic mug, while Arthur looked around the room with a victorious grin before walking out untouched. I replayed those 30 seconds of footage until my shaking hands turned completely still. My emotional shock quickly transformed into absolute, focused determination to bring complete accountability down upon him. The following morning, I dressed in plain civilian clothes rather than my military attire. I did not want Arthur to see an officer approaching. I wanted him to see a determined daughter seeking truth. I found my mother already back behind the counter, covering her bruise with heavy powder while pouring fresh roasts. When I asked her to rest, she simply smiled and reminded me that her diner was her fortress. While she worked, I sat in a corner booth, rewatching the footage and taking detailed notes on Arthur's relaxed demeanor. He had expected total silence from the witnesses, proving this was far from his first act of public intimidation. I quietly reached out to neighboring business owners, discovering a long trail of quiet abuse. A local mechanic admitted Arthur had threatened to ruin his shop, while a florist confessed she had stopped filing complaints after officials ignored her. I meticulously documented every single detail, gathering actual facts rather than vague local gossip. By late afternoon, I contacted a trusted public investigator, and a seasoned attorney to build a legitimate legal case. Arthur spent that afternoon bragging at a nearby cafe about putting the diner owner in her place, entirely unaware that his foundation was crumbling. Within 2 days, the atmosphere across our town shifted as long-silenced citizens began finding their courage. The mechanic recovered archived text messages filled with Arthur's extortion attempts, and the florist brought forward written documentation she had hidden away. People were not stepping up because of my military status. They were stepping up because someone was finally organizing their voices into an undeniable force. Our legal team organized the evidence, prompting official investigators to launch a comprehensive review into his past activities. Community support for Arthur dissolved overnight as vendors quietly terminated supply contracts, and local charities removed his name from sponsor lists. Later that week, Arthur walked into the diner, laughing loudly until he noticed me sitting calmly at the counter booth. He condescendingly referred to me as the soldier girl, prompting me to stand up and state that I was her daughter first. His smirk wavered slightly as he advised me to drop the matter, claiming small towns had long memories. I maintained eye contact, quietly agreeing with his words before he turned around, hurled one last empty threat at a waitress, and stormed out into the street. What Arthur failed to realize was that several patrons had recorded his aggressive display on their mobile devices. That footage was promptly handed over to the authorities, giving investigators yet another clear piece of evidence regarding his relentless misconduct. The heavy silence that had protected his abuse for years was finally breaking apart completely. By the following week, the entire district was discussing the ongoing investigation and the release of the original diner security footage. Seeing the unvarnished truth removed any remaining doubts, encouraging even more victims to step forward and submit sworn affidavits to the prosecutor. When the weekend arrived, Carter's Corner Diner was packed with supportive patrons who had not visited in years. Neighboring business owners delivered fresh flowers, and a local bakery brought over warm pastries with a note thanking my mother for her unwavering dignity. My mother placed the note by the register, quietly observing that people had been paying attention all along. Arthur's once untouchable arrogance vanished as people began staring him down directly whenever he attempted to walk down Main Street. Our attorney soon confirmed that formal charges were officially filed, and every single witness had committed to testifying in open court. On the morning of the preliminary hearing, we walked together into a quiet courtroom that was filled with quiet resolve. Arthur sat across the aisle, stripped of his bravado and looking like a man who finally realized his actions had real consequences. The proceedings were straightforward, relies entirely on video evidence and clear witness testimonies rather than anger. Business owners detailed years of pressure, and customers explained why fear had kept them silent until now. The magistrate evaluated the overwhelming evidence, ensuring Arthur face full legal accountability alongside severe penalties for his documented history of extortion. When we stepped outside onto the courthouse steps, local reporters asked if I felt victorious after bringing down a local tyrant. I looked at the cameras and explained that my goal was never to defeat anyone, but simply to stand firmly beside my mother. She squeezed my hand softly as we walked back toward our vehicle. On the drive back, I pondered how true strength is not demonstrated through violence, but through patient, relentless protection of those who need it most. Justice was not achieved through emotional revenge. It arrived through persistent truth and community solidarity. Life at the diner quickly returned to its peaceful rhythm, filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and warm pancakes. My mother greeted every visiting family with the same gentle grace she had displayed for over 40 years, showing no lingering bitterness. On my final morning before returning to command, we stood together on the front porch, watching the sun rise over the sleepy town. She softly remarked that people always remember who stood beside them when times were tough. My career had taught me how to lead troops, but my mother had taught me the true purpose behind leadership. Courage does not always require a military uniform or high authority to make a lasting difference in this world. Sometimes it simply wears an apron, pours coffee with steady hands, and quietly refuses to let injustice win. That timeless lesson of patience, truth, and resilience is something I will carry with me through every battle ahead. If you enjoyed this inspiring story, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button right now to help us grow. Do not forget to click on one of the videos appearing on your screen right now to watch even more incredible stories just like this one.